Emily Foster thought her quiet Oregon street was safe. She thought the past couldn't reach her. But when an anonymous package landed on her porch, everything changed. 48 hours later, Emily's world spiraled into a nightmare she couldn't escape, and the shadows hiding in her neighborhood revealed they had been there all along, watching, waiting. This is the chilling true crime story of how a simple package became the key to a decades-long cycle of fear, one that might still be continuing today. Emily Foster's small rental home sat quietly on a tree-lined street, where the breeze moved the leaves gently, and neighbors waved while watering their lawns. She liked the quiet, working as a freelance photographer, spending most of her days editing images at her kitchen table, drinking lukewarm coffee, and listening to the hum of the refrigerator. She found comfort in routine, in the softness of her cat curling up by the window, in the predictability of the postman dropping letters into the rusted mailbox at exactly 9:15 each morning. It was during one of these quiet mornings that the package arrived, left neatly on her porch between a potted fern and the welcome mat. She didn't notice it immediately, stepping over it as she let her cat back inside, distracted by a client email and the need to refill her coffee. The box was small, brown, taped with cheap clear tape, and had only her name written in black marker across the top. There was no return address, no postage, no indication of who had left it there or why. Emily moved it inside, placing it on the edge of her counter near the sink, assuming it was something she had ordered and forgotten about during a late-night scroll. Maybe a replacement lens cap or another cheap phone tripod she didn't need. She left it there, untouched, for 2 days. She moved it around the counter to wipe crumbs, shifted it to the dining table while she cleaned, and set it on a chair when she had to make space for her laptop and coffee mug. Each time she picked it up, she noticed how heavy it felt for its size, a solid weight that felt out of place. She would glance at it briefly, meaning to open it, but emails, calls, and a leaking kitchen faucet pulled her attention elsewhere. In the middle of the second night, she woke up with the start, the image of the package in her mind, feeling as if it was calling to her from the kitchen, waiting. She almost got out of bed to open it, but convinced herself to wait until morning, pulling the blanket tighter as she drifted back to sleep to the sound of the wind rattling the window panes. On the morning of the third day, she finally picked up the package after pouring herself coffee, the weight of it pressing into her palm, a faint, metallic smell clinging to the cardboard. She tore the tape open with a butter knife, peeling back the flaps to reveal crumpled layers of newspaper, yellowed and brittle, and buried within them was a single, small, old-fashioned brass key. Beside the key was a photograph printed on cheap glossy paper, the edges curled. It was a photo of her standing on her porch, wearing her gray sweater and jeans, taken at night from the sidewalk, her face visible in the porch light, her eyes looking directly at the camera. She didn't know was there. Emily placed the key and the photograph on her kitchen table, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed the curled edges of the photo, trying to make sense of it. The darkness in the background of the image felt heavy, and the glow of the porch light around her figure made it clear the photo was recent, maybe even taken within the last week. She scanned her memory, trying to remember if she had seen anyone standing outside that night, but nothing came to her. A part of her wanted to believe it was a prank, maybe a cruel joke by someone she didn't know, but deep down, a cold unease pressed against her chest, refusing to let her dismiss it so easily. She placed the key in a drawer beside her kitchen utensils, telling herself it was nothing, and tried to continue her day. But each time she passed the table, her eyes returned to the photograph, and each time she opened the drawer for a fork or a spoon, she felt the presence of the key pressing into the moment, waiting for her to acknowledge it again. That afternoon, while washing dishes, she noticed a small lawn gnome sitting beside her mailbox. She had never owned a lawn gnome, and she hadn't seen anyone put it there, but it sat there, red hat tilted, smiling blankly toward the street. She checked with her neighbors, who shrugged and said they hadn't seen anything unusual. The next morning, she found another photograph. This time, it was resting inside her mailbox, unprotected, slightly damp from the early dew. Her name wasn't written on it, but she knew it was meant for her. It was a photo of her sitting at her kitchen table, the same table where she had placed the first photo and the key, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. The angle was slightly tilted, taken from outside her window in the early morning, when she thought she was alone. The blinds had been halfway open, letting in the soft light of dawn, and her tired face looked directly forward, unaware that a camera lens was watching. A black sedan appeared across the street later that day, parked with its windows up, the engine idling softly as the driver remained unseen behind dark glass. The car sat there for hours while Emily tried to work, her eyes constantly darting to the street, waiting for someone to get out, for the car to leave, for the day to return to normal. When she finally called the police, her voice shaking, they arrived to find the street empty, the car gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of exhaust in the warm afternoon air and the silence of neighbors peeking through curtains, whispering quietly about the strange car and the girl in the small house who suddenly seemed so afraid. Emily's days began to merge into restless stretches of hours filled with glances at the window and half-finished cups of coffee growing cold on every surface. She stopped answering her phone unless she recognized the caller, and even then, her voice sounded distant, wrapped in the tension that settled into her home, a heavy fog. She kept the blinds closed during the day, the sunlight turning thin and gray as it fought to enter her rooms. Each creak of the floorboards made her flinch, each rustle outside her window made her hold her breath, waiting to hear footsteps or the scrape of gravel under someone's shoes. The cameras she installed showed nothing except the empty sway of branches and the occasional flash of headlights passing down her street at night. Yet, at 3:17 a.m., the motion alert on her phone chimed softly, waking her from a thin, restless sleep. She sat up, her hands cold. As she opened the camera feed, a shadow moved across her yard, tall and thin, gliding rather than walking, pausing for a moment to turn toward the camera. The shape seemed to look directly into the lens, standing still, the darkness hiding any details of a face, before moving away and vanishing into the early morning shadows. She didn't sleep again that night, sitting on the edge of her bed until the sky turned pale and the birds began to chirp outside her window. In the days that followed, she stopped leaving her house, except for the quickest errands, glancing over her shoulder every time she unlocked her door, scanning the quiet street for the black sedan she could still see in her mind, even though it had not returned. Packages began to pile up on her porch, deliveries she had forgotten she had ordered, but she left them outside, unable to bring herself to touch any box left near her home. She disconnected her doorbell camera after finding nothing but endless footage of the empty street, the silence in those recordings heavier than any evidence she could have hoped to capture. Even her cat seemed to sense the tension, pacing along the windowsills, staring out into the yard with its ears pinned back, tail twitching slowly. At night, Emily moved from window to window, checking the locks, peeking through the blinds, trying to catch a glimpse of movement or headlights, a sign that someone was still watching, that someone was waiting. Each night felt longer than the one before, the darkness pressing in against the thin walls of her small house, making the silence inside feel like a warning. She could not escape. Emily's exhaustion became a part of her, settling into her shoulders and behind her eyes as the days passed in heavy silence. She stopped checking her email and ignored the notifications piling up on her phone, leaving messages from clients unanswered. Her world had shrunk to the walls of her house, and the sound of her own footsteps across the floor began to feel like an echo of the life she used to have. The key from the package remained in the kitchen drawer, untouched, its cold weight lingering in her mind like a constant whisper she could not silence. She found herself reaching for it without realizing, running her thumb over its ridges before placing it back and closing the drawer quickly, as if afraid it might burn her. One rainy afternoon, the dripping of water from the leaky faucet became too loud to ignore, and she found herself in the kitchen, tightening it, her mind drifting. She glanced around the kitchen and felt an overwhelming urge to find out what the key was meant to open, to break the tension that had wrapped itself around her days like a tightening rope. She walked through each room, testing the key on every lock, every drawer, every old chest she had stored away, but it fit nowhere, turning uselessly before falling back into her palm, cold and accusing. Later that evening, as she tried to sleep, she remembered the basement she rarely entered, a damp, cluttered space filled with boxes she had not unpacked since moving in. The next morning, she made her way down the creaking stairs, the air thick and cold against her skin. She moved boxes aside, dust rising in soft clouds as she uncovered old paint cans and a rusted bicycle frame. In the far corner, hidden behind a leaning stack of flattened cardboard, she found a small door she had never noticed before, its edges blending into the wood paneling, sealed with old planks nailed haphazardly across it. A small brass padlock held the planks together, its surface scratched and tarnished by years of neglect. Her hand shook as she reached for the key, sliding it into the lock. It turned with a click that echoed in the still basement, the boards loosening as she pulled them away, revealing the door fully. She pushed it open, the hinges groaning, and a wave of damp, cold air washed over her as she aimed her flashlight into the darkness beyond. A narrow crawl space led into the shadows, the smell of earth and mildew rising as she stepped forward, her heart pounding, knowing that whatever was hidden there had been waiting for her all along. Emily placed the dusty box of photographs on the passenger seat of her car, her hands gripping the steering wheel. As she drove to the police station, the roads blurry through her tired eyes, she explained everything she had found, her voice steady but hollow as she described the hidden room, the photographs of herself and strangers, the dates that stretched back decades, the map marked with pins and red crosses. The officer at the front desk listened politely, taking notes, but the lines on his face remained unreadable, his practiced nods offering no comfort. They took the box into evidence, telling her they would look into it, that someone would be in touch, but she could see in their eyes that the weight of what she had found would soon be buried under other reports, other cases, other emergencies. She returned home to find her house exactly as she had left it, silent and still. But the silence no longer felt like protection. It felt like a reminder that the walls around her could not keep out what had already been inside for so long. The nights grew longer, stretching into each other as she lay awake, listening to the creaks of the house, the ticking of the clock, the soft, restless movements of her cat pacing along the windowsills. She pulled the curtains tighter, turned on the lights in every room, and kept her phone charged and close to her hand, waiting for a call from the police that never came. Weeks passed, and the fear slowly turned into a dull, heavy exhaustion that settled into her bones. She began to leave the house again, taking slow walks around the block in the early mornings, when the streets were empty and the air smelled of dew. She watched for the black sedan, but it never returned, leaving her with the constant, uneasy question of whether it was truly gone, or simply waiting. She spoke to her neighbors less, nodding politely, but moving on quickly, afraid they might ask questions she did not want to answer. One afternoon, as she returned from the store, she saw a moving truck across the street. A young couple carrying boxes into the house that had been empty for months. She watched them laugh as they arranged furniture, waving at neighbors who stopped to welcome them. She wanted to warn them, to tell them what could happen, but the words never formed. 48 hours later, as she watched from her window, a small brown package appeared on their porch, sitting quietly between the welcome mat and a potted plant. No return address, no name, just the same silence she had once mistaken for safety, waiting patiently to be opened.